From Oklahoma, Mr. Lucas is recognized for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Case and Mr. Grossman, would you characterize any of the policies discussed in the U.S., such as major industrial CO2 restrictions, as flexible or adaptive?
Maybe before.
Either one, gentlemen.
I would not. I think the Clean Power Plan in particular is marketed in that way, but has been designed by EPA to give states very few options in how they proceed.
And would either one of you care to address how those restrictions will impact the industries and the consumers of those products ultimately?
Sure. Essentially what the Clean Power Plan attempts to achieve is to implement a cap-and-trade system on the country in direct contravention of the decision of the Congress not to implement such a cap-and-trade plan. And what that will do is force states to install significant amounts of renewable energy in place of the reliable fossil fuel baseload that they use today. The impact of that is to replace lower cost energy sources with higher cost energy sources, and it does not take a very sophisticated economic model to conclude that replacing lower cost sources with higher cost sources is unlikely to reduce costs.
And the net effect is giving government the control over both the production and, in effect, the consumption of energy, which is a major expansion of economic power. Fair assessment, gentlemen?
If I could, it is. And it's one, interestingly enough, that this Congress has rejected on any number of occasions, holding that, the mix of electricity and energy sources is something that really is left to the states for their regulation, and something that has never been federalized and that has been resisted as a federal encroachment on state authority. And so this really, the EPA's actions turn that on its head.
And to take that one step farther, we live in a very intensive energy consumption society here, both in manufacturing and in our personal consumption. With the federal government having that kind of control over both the production of and the consumption of energy, picking winners and losers, so to speak, it's fair to say that from this vantage point, it's almost unimaginable what the consequences could be. Fair assessment, gentlemen?
I think that's correct. And if I could make one additional point,
please.
I think what we are seeing in the debate over the Clean Power Plan and the economic effects is really a very fundamental debate over whether an agency like EPA can manage a sector of the economy better than it will be managed and operate in the free market. And so if you take, for instance, the testimony of Dr. Steer, the assumption he is making is that, in fact, we will get better efficiency and economic growth through government regulation than we get through the free market. I think that is something that has been asserted by those in favor of more government power at many points in history, and I think that is something that almost never works, and that there's no evidence it would work better in this situation.
And isn't it a fair assessment to say that industry already is, in effect, being stampeded as they try to figure out what's coming and how to prepare for that?
That's absolutely true. I think one very concerning thing about the way that the EPA has operated is to essentially put forward rules that in many cases it realizes it may not have the authority for, and simply force industry to respond before the courts can throw out the rule. I think we saw this in the Supreme Court's decision in Michigan versus EPA, where it said EPA had overstepped its authority, and the EPA spokesman almost immediately put out a statement essentially saying, well, too bad, industry already had to adapt before you made your ruling, so your ruling won't have much effect. And they're trying to do something similar with the Clean Power Plan, forcing states to move forward into a cap-and-trade structure before the question of authority is even resolved.
When I was a kid at home, we would have called that the bully bluffing.
That would be a fair description.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.